Radio Television of Serbia. Radio Television of Serbia is Serbia's public broadcaster. It broadcasts and produces news, drama, and sports programming through radio, television, and the internet. RTS is a member of the European Broadcasting Union. Radio Television of Serbia has four organizational units: radio, television, music production, and record label. PGPRTS. It is financed primarily through monthly subscription fees and advertising revenue. History: Radio Belgrade, 1929–1958. Radio Belgrade began its broadcasts in 1929. The first news announcer in 1929 was Jelena Bilbija. The first radio program in Serbia was broadcast in February 1929. When released, radio signal was transmitted from the transmitter in Belgrade suburb of Rakovica. After 5 years, on 24th March 1929, Radio Belgrade began with regular broadcasting of its program from the building of the Serbian Academy of Sciences and Arts. Radio Television Belgrade, 1958–1991. Radio Television Belgrade (RTB), consisting of Radio Belgrade and Television Belgrade (TVB), was established as a result of the decision by the Executive Council of the Socialist Republic of Serbia on 13 February 1958. This came after the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia's government decision of 1956 to invest in a television network. The first televised broadcast was on 23rd August 1958, an edition of the Dnevnik Journal news program with Milo Orlović, Branislav Surutka, Olga Nać, Olivera Živković, and Vera Milovanović. The first RTB program was broadcast from the Belgrade Fair and from a new TV studio built there. From 1961, RTS began to use quadruplex videotape recording equipment. The 60s saw dramatic development in all genres of TV programs. TVB became famous by its sitcoms, directed and written by Radivoje Lola Đukić, Novak Novak, and others. Unfortunately, only a small proportion is preserved owing to implicit censorship and shortages of tapes. Also, TVB had excellent documentary programs, series Caravan, Reflector, and others, and quizzes. By 1970, the entire territory of Serbia was covered by the RTS signal. On 31st December 1971, TVB started broadcasting in PAL color system on its second network. A new AM radio broadcast equipment in Zvečka Obrenovac with 2000 kilowatt transmitter was erected in 1976. After the political turmoil in the 1970s against the liberals, the program of RTB became more sterile. However, in the 1980s it reached the zenith. In 1989, preparation for the formation of the RTS system officially began. That same year, 3K-TVB started broadcasting as the youth alternative TV channel. Along with it, Radio 101 started broadcasting in Belgrade and Vojvodina. Radio 101 was the more commercial youth radio, carrying pop and turbo folk hits. It was intended to complement the more alternative Belgrade 202. In 1990, a few regional studios, Niš, Kragujevac, Jagodina, Šabac, officially started broadcasting regional programming via window in place of Beogradska Kronika. In 1991, all public broadcasters within Serbia began the formation of the RTS network system by merging their stations and programming direction to RTB, which served as flagship of the RTS network. Radio Television of Serbia, 1990s. During the March 1991 anti-war demonstrations in Belgrade, the protesters issued a series of demands, one of which was the sacking of RTB's general director Dusan Mitević. The Yugoslav government eventually relented and removed Mitević from his position at RTB. On 8 October 1991, four RTB journalists were killed on the Glina Petrinja road in central Croatia while covering Yugoslavia's civil war. RTS was established in 1992 with the merger of RTB and regional networks Radio Television Novi Sad and Radio Television Pristina into a true national network. All transmitters, relay stations, antennas, and other television equipment once owned by these broadcasters were inherited by RTS. As Yugoslavia disintegrated, RTS's journalistic standards plummeted. During the siege of Dubrovnik, RTS claimed that smoke rising from the old city's old town was the result of automobile tires set on fire by locals. During the siege of Sarajevo, RTS newscast showed an image of Sarajevo from the 1980s, untouched, thereby downplaying the severity of the siege. As the wars dragged on, the Yugoslav government began terminating the employment of many dissenting journalists. By January 1993, nearly 1,300 RTS employees, amounting to one third of the broadcaster's pre war workforce, had been fired. RTS was active during the Kosovo War and the concurrent NATO bombing of Yugoslavia. On 20th April, the Supreme Allied Commander, Europe General Wesley Clark, ordered that RTS was to be bombed off the air. NATO missiles struck RTS at 2:06 a.m. on 23rd April. Serbia's Minister of Information, Aleksandar Vučić, scheduled to appear on CNN's Larry King Live from RTS headquarters at 2:30 a.m., narrowly escaped the bombing. 16 RTS employees were killed and an additional 16 were injured. The human rights organization Amnesty International condemned the attack and described it as a war crime. NATO officials stated that the alliance considered RTS a legitimate target because of its biased and distorted coverage of the war. The bombing temporarily forced RTS off the air, but it resumed broadcasting several hours later and continued to do so for the rest of the conflict. Most of the RTS's headquarters was reconstructed after the war, but a part of it was left in ruins as a memorial to those killed. The victims of the bombing were later memorialized by the Zašto monument in Belgrade's Tašmadian Park. In 2002, Dragoljub Milanovic, the general manager of RTS, was sentenced to 9.5 years imprisonment for failing to evacuate the broadcaster's headquarters despite repeated threats by NATO officials that it would be bombed. Radio Television of Serbia, 2000s. After Milosevic's removal from power, RTS underwent reconstruction in order to regain respect amongst much of its audience, which the network had lost during the 90s. Particular emphasis was put on news programming, which suffered greatly during the 1990s. In 2006, RTS became the most viewed television network in Serbia and has retained this position since then. Early that year, RTS decided to shut down one of its television channels, 3K, Treći kanal RTS, was a channel dedicated to the youth, which however became the main film, series and sports channel in the late 1990s and the early 2000s. In 2007, the BBC World Service Trust launched an extensive training program at Serbia's national broadcaster. This 30-month project, which was funded by the European Union, provided some extensive journalism, craft and management training to all levels of staff at the broadcast.